So I just talked to Krishanda. She's been working with you guys a little bit about kind of where we're at. She is new, so she's learning and she's doing a great job. But it sounds like there's a little bit of pushback, resistance from you guys. So I just thought it would be easier for us just to get into a room and kind of talk about where you guys are coming from, so that I understand, and maybe just share with you guys a little bit about our process and why and what that looks like. So I'm sorry about David.
Thank you.
It sounds like that has been a rough go, but that he's maybe doing a little better than what was originally.
He's actually pretty much fully recovered.
That is amazing.
Yeah,
I mean,
and literally on day one we were told he could die, and then beyond that first week we were told he could have major neurological implications like quadriplegia, no less.
Wow. Yeah,
and at this point he's back to where he was and actually advancing beyond where he was.
Okay, well that's good
So
then.
pretty much a miracle.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. So I'm very happy to hear that.
Yeah.
So what we would like to do is get out of your lives, because we have other more important things to do than harass people who are being good parents and taking care of their children.
Sure.
Our process has changed over the years, so I don't know if you're familiar with it at all. So I'm just gonna. They introduced about 4 years ago a new safety assessment, and it had to do with the fact that we were getting calls on families and we weren't asking the right questions, and so we would focus on the target child, which in this case would be David. We wouldn't ask those obvious questions of children like, do you feel safe? And they had a child that died on one of our caseloads. So they changed how we do our assessment, and it's a much more thorough assessment. Obviously we can use common sense when it's a situation like this. So really at this point what we're asking for is that you let, and I don't care if you stand where you can hear us. Like you're a parent. I expect that. Like I want you to be protective of your children. It's nice to see parents do the right thing. That's good. But basically, just a question of: do you guys feel safe? Is there anything that you need? Are you concerned about anything? That question is really the one that we need to ask. And so, I guess my thoughts would be: is what are your thoughts around that? And what barriers do you see with that?
Well, I'll go ahead and go over for us what the original case was about specifically.
Yeah,
like,
so it was
you have a referral, so if you could even just stick to exactly what the text of the referral was.
Yeah, and so that was obviously the concerns with David, that the initial one, which it sounds like it was a mistake, misrepresented, was that it could have been prevented. And so then after you talked to the doctor, it was very clear that was
okay, so you've
false.
talked to the doctor, so you're satisfied about the NG tube situation, is that correct?
Completely.
So the department is completely satisfied in that regard.
Yeah, and then we need a release to talk to the, so we had 2 referrals on David. So the original one was when he had a stroke, is my understanding, and somebody was alleging that it could have been prevented, that it had to do with lack of parental care.
And was that a licensed medical professional who was responsible for David's case who made that allegation?
I can't share who made that allegation, and here's the thing, like, it could be anybody off the street, which is kind of what makes our job, let me tell you, makes our job hard. We have many times where we have parents who are mad at each other because they're in the middle of a custody battle. They can call anonymously, not leave any information, and guess what we have to do? We have to go and investigate it just like it's anything else. And so, yeah, there's probably a little bit of a flaw to our system, but that's way beyond us. That's like, go legislate, go talk to our legislators and the state.
So the original referral would be that something that we did as parents were the cause of his stroke. Okay. So if, in order for that to be true, would you agree that there would have to be a medically diagnosable condition that was a pre-existing condition that leads to stroke?
So all of that, like, is I know where you're going with it, is irrelevant, because she talked to the doctor, and the doctor said that was completely not true.
Okay, so you're already satisfied about the original referral as well.
Yes,
okay.
So that one's completely
So both
satisfied.
referrals...
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
First referral.
Okay,
I'm
got
satisfied.
it. Okay.
So then we got our second referral with the GI tube. And then you talked to Dad, and you guys shared that it has already been dealt with, that you've already...
Yeah, Selena had been to our home.
Okay.
Does Selena work in the department, or is she a contractor?
She's a contractor.
That's
She's
what I
our
thought.
on-call, after hours worker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so she came to our home, and was she satisfied that we had obviously followed the medical professionals' consults?
So, the problem with our on-call, and this is probably why this is feeling a little bit redundant to you,
Uh-huh.
is that they are trained to basically lay eyes on a child.
Mhm.
They don't ask the right questions.
Okay.
It's a training issue. We're working on it, and so a lot of times her assessments are, we check the box, yes, the child was seen, so our time frames are met, but as far as our assessment, it's not done. And
Okay.
so that's where Krishanda is coming in,
Okay.
going, I have this paper that I have these, and I can even show you a copy of one, of these questions that have to be answered, and she has no answer. So
Okay. So
on the-
let's go back to the question. So the open question in your mind was related to the NG2.
Mhm.
So if we provided you with a St. Luke's discharge paper that says that on November 22nd, when we were discharged, that they were fully aware and had consulted with us about the NG tube, and that they were satisfied that going home without an NG tube for 2 to 3 days was perfectly within what we had discussed with them, and they thought that was fine, would you be satisfied that whoever referred to you on November 22nd with concern about the NG tube, that clearly the medical professionals were already approving of our going home without an NG tube?
Well, that would be helpful information, but unfortunately, it had already been, it was called in anyway,
Mhm.
and so, like, that's helpful because it shows that, obviously the information, whoever had the information didn't
Was
have
wrong.
the full story.
Yeah.
Right. We used to be able to do in our system, click erroneous, and
Uh-huh.
we go away.
Okay.
They have taken that away from us.
Okay, got it.
I wish we could do that, because
Yeah.
then I would say, yes, give me that, let's click erroneous, and let's
Perfect.
get out of your life.
Okay.
They've changed it. We can't do that.
Okay.
Okay, so who is they that's changed it?
The state, like the
Okay.
feds, the federal government, and the state of Idaho.
Okay, and how long ago was this?
Like, when did they pull that? It's probably been 4+ years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is there a policy that you guys have that we could be provided, or, I mean, you guys have to have something that says that you have to do this?
No, most people don't question us. Like, that's the thing. You
Yeah.
know? And that's
Basically, here's where we're coming from. So you would have to provide us with statutory authority that shows that you have the right, by legal authority, to go beyond the original referral to ask us questions that are not related to the original referral. And where we're coming from is that we think that someone who referred to you was not in the know and
Right.
was not one of the actual medical professionals in charge of David's case. So we have documentation from the medical professionals that say they were in the know and that the original referral was erroneous. And so we are able to provide that documentation to you from those medical professionals.
Right.
And we are, because of the Constitution of the United States, are not willing to let you, and also because of statute, because Idaho recognizes parental authority in the home over their children, and since there's been no referral made to you about any of our other children, we would like to retain our constitutional abilities to go ahead and not allow you access to the other children, since there's no concern that's been raised with the department regarding them. Unless you can provide some legal authority that requires us to make them available
I can give you a
to
copy
you.
of our standards.
Yeah, it would have to be a legal authority
Yeah, I
that
can- yeah, I can-
obviously supersedes, the constitutional authority.
Well, and so here's the thing: in the state of Idaho, like child protection, our legal stuff, like law enforcement, they can't go talk to your children without your permission.
Mm-hmm.
Child protection, because of what we do with child abuse and protecting vulnerable children, sometimes unfortunately from their parents, like we have more authority to do that.
Well, actually, so to correct you, and you don't mind if I say this, right? I mean, child protection has no more legal authority than a law enforcement officer. So we've studied this quite a bit in the federal courts because we're in the Ninth Circuit, and the Ninth Circuit has affirmed that even though you're in the child protection business, that you actually don't possess any more legal authority than a law enforcement officer when it comes to the Constitution of the United States. So a parent retains legal authority over their children. And so if we don't grant our consent, then you can't go to a court, according to our knowledge of the Constitution and court precedent, and obtain something that any other law enforcement officer cannot also obtain.
Okay, so I'm going to put a stop to this because obviously you're taking a very legal stance on this. I was hoping that we could come together as individuals with our best intentions.
Mhm.
We can get what we need. You can have your life back. Obviously, you want to take this to a much more legal slant, which we can do that. So I will get a hold of our Deputy Attorney General. I will ask her to provide some written documentation, and then I will staff it with my higher ups, and we can just look at possibly doing like a court summons, where we'll just have you guys come into court. You state on what authority you're refusing to cooperate with us, and then she can court order you to do it. And then at that point, you guys can decide what you want to do. Not saying that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to staff it up, but that's one of our options. I think that generally we have the best interests, the best intentions. Families usually realize that, bring their kids in, call it good, and we're done. And so, I don't know where you're coming from or why, but I respect that as a parent, that you're right. So I'll just look at it differently, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. And in the meantime, we'd be very happy to provide his discharge paperwork related to the original
because I'll show them
referral.
that and see if they're willing to make an exception based on the fact that
Yeah, that sounds great, because that obviously sounds like you were satisfied on the first referral, and then it sounds like as far as the second referral, we can certainly provide a legal document.
Yeah, we were allowed to just kind of politely ignore the first one because we talked to the doctor and he said no, that was completely erroneous. So perhaps I can get the same pardon type thing.
Yeah, that would be great. I mean, if you could basically work with us.
Perfect. And then you were supposed to provide her a release of information. She's new. She's talked to you without one in our possession. So can I get that from you, that you said that you provided, you were going to drop off or send or?
Okay, so I didn't say I was going to drop it off. Okay. She said that she was going to provide. I said please send the release to me.
Okay.
And
so can we get a release from you, from you saying that you communicate with her?
Communicate with her.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and so what happened was.
Put her name right there.
I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about.
No.
Okay, just so you know.
She's been talking to you, and I'm like, oh my god, like you can't do that.
Okay, but tell me how to fill this out here.
So this is going to be your information.
Okay, got it.
And then her information.
10th floor. Okay.
Yeah.
So what's funny is she told me that, and I came to the department the other day, and they gave me a form that was not this.
Okay.
And so then I turned it in, and I just received in the mail yesterday. It was more like a records release form. And so I received in the mail that since it's an open case, we can't release records. Yeah, so it's kind of fun.
Yeah, I was like, we need a release.
So that sounds like a
I went up front and
miscommunication.
they're like, there's nothing here. And I was like, I swear she said it was okay.
And then the doctor that you're working with now, are you okay if we contact him and just verify that he's under medical, you're following through type thing? I think she said that you guys were okay with that, but I don't know what that.
Yeah, I mean that it would be fine for him to make a statement that he is, that David's in ongoing medical care.
That's all we need.
Because that's actually exactly what's happening.
Perfect. Okay. And then if you guys have documentation showing that the discharge was not as we were told, and you can get that
Yes,
to us,
which we
I would
can get.
appreciate that.
And then the other thing, because it sounds to me like you were asking about what safety of the children in the home, that the other thing we have offered to you is we would be willing to have our children go see a licensed physician in the state of Idaho, and then he can make a statement as to their health condition.
Yeah, and
if that would satisfy.
That's not what we mean by safety. So what we mean by safety is more all-encompassing. As far as, are you getting 3 meals a day? Are you being locked in a closet? We're looking way beyond that, just crazy stuff. And so that was why we were just hoping that you would let us just visit with the kids.
Yeah, but there is a right to privacy in the United States Constitution. So.
Yep. I understand that.
All right, let's see. So I authorize that would be her.
Yeah, that would be her, and then you can just sign it at the bottom. And then there's like a spot where I have just typed in like a general what kind of information I want. If you're not satisfied with that, you can handwrite in.
Okay, let's see. So make sure this
what you want.
Okay.
Get it worked out.
There you go. There.
I'm going to get to exactly what his statement saying that he's how he's doing it.
Okay. So
Perfect.
send that over to them. And then you've got contact information, how to get a hold of these guys?
I should
Mhm.
Okay, so let me see what I can work out, and then we'll get back to you guys on what we're going to do.
Okay, and then our one follow-up item then for us is we'll go ahead and get that release of medical records from St. Luke's that has the discharge instructions, that has the modification that shows the NG tube.
Perfect.
And just so you know what to expect, it's going to say, it's actually going to say that that he was discharged and they knew his NG tube was out and recommended he go home, and we try it for 2 or 3 days to see if he
Okay.
needed it put back in.
Perfect.
And then we actually did get it put back in 2 days, November 24th, which I think you already know.
Yeah, yeah. And he's doing well.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Good. Wonderful.
Okay.
All right. Well, nice meeting you
Yeah,
guys.
thank you.